them noticing, and by the time they noticed, they were already airborne? None of these questions are fully answered in the Aircraft Accident Investigation Board's report. What it does do, though, without actually saying that it was human error or pilot error, without actually alluding to mistakes by the pilot, what it does allude to, the implication of it, is that because the fuel control switches had been transitioned, that's the word that's been used. It's a deliberate use of phrase, transitioned from run to cutoff. That's why the fuel flow to both the engines was cut off, and as a result, it was a double engine failure and the engine started to spool down. By implication, what this report is doing is it's pointing fingers at the two pilots, who of course cannot defend themselves because they are dead. Let's try and make sense of this, but I want to play out some reactions by pilots associations, many of whom have taken grave exception to this report by the Aircraft Investigation Board. Let's listen in.
मैं अभी भी कहूँगा कि ये टेक्निकल एरर मतलब ये नहीं कि कंपोनेंट कोई फेल हो गया है, ये तो अभी इन्वेस्टिगेशन के अंदर वो सब देखेंगे। सब जहाज जो हैं वो सेफ होते हैं, तकनीकी खराबी किसी में भी हो सकती है।
I mean, I would go along with their objection because there should be a senior pilot dealing with who has dealt with 787, Dreamliner or Boeing, or even 737, a person who's experienced in this kind of aircraft. He should be there. That way, I think they should now include it if they pointed it out.
It's too early to put a blame on anyone. The AAIB in its report has not apportioned the blame on A or B. In that situation, analyzing and coming back and putting a blame on the captains per se is unfair. Whether the captains, whether the company, whether Boeing company or for the management or for Air India, it's very, very unfair. They are the rightful body. They would have international consultations. They would be able to analyze the wreckage. They would be able to analyze what actually happened in the cockpit, and which they have done beautifully. It is for them to put on a piece of paper whose fault was it. Whatever time they take, they should come.
I want to go across to Captain Saurav Bhatnagar. He's a former senior pilot who's flown the Airbus A320. Captain Bhatnagar, again, I want to be very, very clear about the facts. The report does not say pilot A or pilot B was responsible, but by just selectively quoting from the cockpit voice recorder, selectively saying, the reason for the crash was the transitioning. Again, the use of the phrase transition is quite deliberate, I think. Transitions from run to cutoff, and that's why, the fuel supply was cut off to both the engines. Do you think that this report is being unfair to the two pilots? Obviously, they can't defend themselves, but it's alluding to and by implication saying that possibly pilot error is what caused this airline to crash?
Jacob, good evening. Yes, absolutely. It is. This report is, I would call it, again, it's my own personal opinion, it's a flimsy, sketchy report, lacking the complete data, what a preliminary investigation report should have as per the ICAO Annex 13, Chapter 7. It says that in case you have a very high-profile investigation or an accident, first of all, the dissemination of data has to be there, even in the preliminary investigation report. Where is the data? Taking very selectively, very beautifully and very carefully crafted out this report. Doesn't mention anything about the technical aspect, the faulty in case of wrong signal going or something of that sort, anything about technical aspects of the switches. I have been operating the switches on Airbus 320 for so many years. Numerous times I have operated these kinds of, the locking mechanism switches. You cannot operate in 1 second both the switches. It's humanly not possible.
So Captain, tell me something. This is, of course, an aircraft investigation board constituted by the Ministry of Civil Aviation. It comes under the government, right? And there are 5 members, I believe, of that board, all 5, Indian members. What can they possibly gain by blaming the dead pilots?
Where is any pilot in the investigation team? Do you have standard thing when you have an aircraft operation accident like this? The first thing they should have minimum is having a senior experienced pilot of 787 on the board. What happens inside the cockpit? Does any of the team member knows? How does it function? What happens at the takeoff? Who is looking where? Is the pilot flying looking outside, pilot monitoring looking inside? What is happening inside the cockpit at this time? What happens inside the cockpit when the fuel cutoff switch or something is, or any kind of, that's what I'm saying, transition, the word transition. They've just stopped short of saying that, it has been done manually, but we all know it cannot automatically go to switch off position on its own. And in now, even the Boeing and FAA have said that the locking mechanism was okay, there was no problem. In 2023, Air India changed the complete throttle quadrant, which included the fuel control switches. So we are forced to believe that the locking mechanism is working perfectly.
No, but now the DGCA, today the DGCA this evening has put out a circular to all airlines, Indian airlines, that operate Boeing fleet for the 737, the 747, the 787. They've all been asked by July 21 to check their fuel control switches for this problem, basis the advisory that was issued by the FAA in 2018. The question is, what were they doing for 6 years? They could have done this, before the crash happened and before 260 people died.
Absolutely, I don't know, because thing is, see, that's a special airworthiness bulletin specifically says the part number of Boeing 737 and 787. What series are there? So now I don't know all the whether the airlines flying Boeings like Air India Express, you got the SpiceJet flying, whether they have done it or not. They should have been done earlier. Now even after the report has come in, for the last 2 days DGCA would have come immediately to check all the locking mechanisms of the series. But it depends upon that part number specifically which has been manufactured by Honeywell. It doesn't mean that you ground the entire feed and check everything. If that part number is fitted, then yes, you have to check it. Now the other thing is if the fuel control switches physically has to be moved, only then the electrical signal is created. But yes, there can be an erroneous electrical signal. What happens with the ANA Airlines, Japan Airlines, when the aircraft landed 787 on the runway, the fuel control switches commanded to off position when the engine switched off, and it was towed to the apron. But that erroneous signal, nobody is looking at. Yes, I know that EAFR also gets the physical position signal. It's basically, end of the day, this fuel shut-off valve is electromechanically operated. The signal goes to the FADEC gives it to EEC, and EEC goes and runs the motor. It sends the signals to the shut-off valve.
But Captain, tell me, in your experience, can it happen that this electronically, in a faulty manner, not by correct procedure, but in a faulty manner, that because of electronic issues or mechanical issues, this fuel control switch can go from run to cut off?
That is what the AAIB is supposed to come out in the preliminary investigation report. Why only the pilot angle? Why only saying the fuel control switches that everybody knows that cannot be even inadvertently moved? It has to remove it is a spring-loaded switch. You have to, against the switch, you have to pull it up. And with the two fingers, and then you bring it back, and again it goes back to the latch. Now, why they have missed out that yes, this is what they should have added a line also, that there is no erroneous signal, there was nothing with the software malfunctioning. Why they didn't mention that? Secondly, CVR transcript is a raw data is supposed to be given, not a paraphrasing. One pilot did, one pilot not.
Yeah, one sentence of each pilot they've put instead of actually releasing the entire
everything
CVR.
Is, even the movement of the switch is captured by the EAFR. Both the pilots have got different headset, both channels, everything is recorded. You can easily make out which pilot said that, whether it was left seat pilot or the right seat pilot.
All right, Captain Bhatnagar, we'll leave it at that. Like I said, our only attempt is to try and get to the bottom of what caused the unfortunate crash of AI-171. But by implication, not necessarily literally, but certainly by implication, the report seems to be pointing in the direction of human error or pilot error, which of course many pilot associations have taken offense to, are offended by, because the pilots clearly are not there to defend themselves. But what about the role of Boeing? The original equipment manufacturer, as they are known. Boeing has been under scrutiny for a few years now. In fact, Ed Pearson is an ex-high-level Boeing manager turned whistleblower. He testified before the United States Congress in 2019 after a couple of crashes of the Boeing 737 MAX. There were safety issues around the 737s, which he had flagged particularly around the 737 MAX variant. There were two crashes that happened between 2017 and 2018. He had flagged multiple indicators of what he believed were chaotic and dangerous manufacturing practices at the facilities that produced the Boeing 737 MAX planes. He said for the company, the priority seemed to be matching the orders that were placed as opposed to putting an emphasis on safety requirements. Mr. Pearson's now joining me. Thank you very much, Mr. Ed Pearson, for speaking with us. What did you make of this preliminary report of the Aircraft Accident Investigation Board, which looked into the crash of Air India Flight 171?
First of all, I just want to pass our condolences to the families of the people that lost their lives. The report that came out, we believe, has some information in it, but it's lacking a lot of information. There was no discussion on potential aircraft system faults. And so we actually had put together a list of questions ourselves, and I'm happy to discuss those with you if you like.
Yeah, please go ahead with those questions. But I would also want to know from you, as somebody who's worked in the safety aspect of Boeing aircraft and red flagged some of those safety concerns with the 737s, what do you think is particularly lacking in this AAIB report, the crash report of Air India Flight 171? What more information do you believe could have been included as part of this report so that there is a fair degree of transparency around it?
As I mentioned, there was no discussion of potential system faults. The report certainly inferred or implied that perhaps the pilots had either accidentally or deliberately moved those cutoff switches. But there's a lot of information that we don't have. And what's important about this is that we believe that information exists. We know that information exists. There's more information that hasn't come out. And so it's too early to say, or even to infer this was a pilot error. There's a lot of things that could potentially happen systems-wise that could mimic the movement of a switch. There's in the airplane, they call it EWIS, or Electrical Wiring Interconnect System. And what that is the electrical infrastructure of an airplane. And that includes everything from the engine generators, to the wiring, to the connectors, to the junction boxes, to the power panels. All that type of infrastructure is all called EWIS. And there are specific things when an airplane is manufactured, it has to meet specific standards in terms of wiring, and in terms of spacing, in terms of making sure that it's properly routed and it's not accidentally routed over, say, a sharp edge, which could cause some sort of electrical arcing or short circuiting. Okay. You also have other types of electrical wiring interconnect system type issues that could occur. And there's a range of those things. In fact, we wrote down a list of them this morning. And these types of things include improper clamping, and I mentioned, or routing. So if you clamp wiring incorrectly, you could damage the wiring. Wire insulation can be damaged if there's any type of intrusion of water or any kind of fluids, dust, etc. build up. You can have loose connectors. You can have open and short circuits. You can also have arcing. Electrical arcing can create a conductive path to bypass a switch. So there's a lot of things in the electrical side that needs to be examined, and other types of systems. Obviously, the electronics is incredibly important.
There's also this focus now on the FAA Advisory from 2018. And it seems like Air India, much like many other airlines, did not seem to follow it because it was an advisory, it was not mandatory. You have so far mentioned about electrical issues, mechanical errors possibly, but what about software? There have been instances where software problems have led to issues on aircraft.
Right. And we've also seen service bulletins and other regulatory things that have been pushed out, like special SAIB bulletins. This is important because there's a program that's called Continued Operational Safety. It's managed by the FAA in the United States, and in other countries it's managed by their equivalent of the regulatory agency. And that process is when there's a defect or a problem with an airplane, they send out these messages. And some of these messages are advisory, and some of them are mandatory. So, for example, airworthiness directives are mandatory requirements that may go along with a service bulletin, say, to do a specific maintenance action or a specific fix of a defect. So that type of information is out there. We've heard, and I know there's reports of other information that was pushed out there that was advisory, and we understand Air India didn't follow it. But if it's not mandatory, then it's a good chance that there's other airlines that may also be in a similar situation. So I guess I want to really emphasize that our point here is that we believe there's information, data that exists today that should be that's factual, that needs to be pushed out there and given to the public. Too often you hear these comments like, just let us do the analysis, don't speculate. But, we believe that speculation is actually healthy because, you get information out there, you have people discuss it and analyze it. It could eliminate things. It could help you zero in on potential problems. But, we don't want this thing to drag on because people are getting on these planes. So it's really imperative that the investigators move with much faster pace. Now, you mentioned the TCMA. I'm not an expert in that area. That's an example of the complexity of these systems. We really need some electronic technicians, aviation maintenance technicians, people that work on these systems to help with the investigation. So
I do want to ask you, Mr. Pearson, is it possible, in your experience, is it possible that the fuel cutoff switches face some kind of a malfunction, whether an electrical, electronic, or mechanical malfunction, or does it necessarily have to be manually moved from run to cutoff? Have these fuel cutoff switches seen manufacturing defects or malfunction issues in the past without human intervention?
Well, those are all very good questions. The cutoff switches are spring-loaded switches, so if they're installed properly, they're difficult. You can't just bump them; they have to lift them up and go over the detent. But the switches are part of a system, right? So you have that position of this. There's sensors that detect the position of that switch and other parameters, and those signals get sent to some sort of an acquisition device that captures all that and converts it to useful information. As I was mentioning, I back up there. We have seen manufacturing issues in the past. Unfortunately, we saw this in the 737 accidents, that you have potential manufacturing issues that can occur that would, like the electrical wiring interconnect system. Again, if it's not properly installed, if you have wiring and stuff that's not properly bonded or grounded, the components, you can have issues with the electrical issues, stray voltages, things like that. So there's many types of systems, stuff that needs to be, and I'm not an expert in all these systems, obviously, but the point is there are people who are automatically dismissing this and blaming the pilots based on the report, how it was written. And we don't think that's proper. We're not saying that it's not possible, but you really need to exhaust all that first. And the concern is that people are just going to say, oh, everything's fine. It must have been some pilot that either accidentally or deliberately moved the switch. So there's a lot of complexity here, and we really think that this information already exists. It's in the hands of the investigators. And the pattern we've seen in the past is they drag these investigations out for a very long time, and people forget what happened and they gets lost in the news cycle. And that's not what should happen. What needs to happen is they need to move with appropriate urgency. They need to, it sounds like that's what the Indian Aircraft Investigation Bureau is doing. But again, it's too complicated to just dismiss all these other possibilities.
I do want to ask you, your complaint about Boeing, and you talked about some of these electrical issues ahead of the 737 crashes that happened. How did Boeing receive this? How was it met? Eventually, you had to go all the way to the US Congress and you testified there against the company. Do you believe Boeing has a vested interest, a stake in sort of burying some of these whistleblower reports?
So in the 737 MAX program where I worked, we had a lot of issues in the manufacturing of the airplanes back in 2017, 18, 19. I left in the 2018 just before the Lion Air crash. And what I saw, and it's been reported widely, is the chaotic and dangerous manufacturing practices, people being rushed, parts issues, quality control issues, et cetera. This has all been discussed in detail. It came out again in the Alaska accident, flight 1282. Even as we speak right now, I mean, it pains me to say this, but the U.S. government authorities who are supposed to be oversighting of the Boeing company, for specifically the FAA, the Department of Transportation, and then the NTSB has an investigative role. We believe they've been failing at their job. We feel strongly about this. We've testified to Congress about this. Myself, people like Sam Salapur, Joe Jacobson. There's been other people that have been pointing these issues out. So this is something that is not completely fixed. We still see signs of this. We track very closely the aircraft incident reports and regulatory actions in our foundation. The point that I also want to make is that even as we speak right now, the NTSB chair, Jennifer Homedy, has unilaterally decided to withhold evidence that has been called critical evidence in the MAX accident investigations. Even though those accident investigations have been completed, new production documents and other documents surfaced that clearly show, unfortunately, that the Boeing company and the FAA knew that the MAX airplanes were having difficulty in the electrical installation of the EWIS in the factory. And there's documentation showing that after the airplane was delivered to Ethiopia in the first month of operation, it experienced a low altitude uncommanded roll, and the Ethiopians had sent communication to Boeing, and we have copies of this, and we've shared it with U.S. authorities like the NTSB, like the Department of Justice. And what happened is that documentation shows that the Ethiopians were asking Boeing engineering to help them troubleshoot this low altitude incident, and ended up happening was they came back and sent them the flight data recorder. This is before the plane crash, the same plane that later crashed. And ended up happening was they came back and said that they looked at the flight data recorder information and they concluded that there was an intermittent electrical fault in the wiring that goes right to those critical avionics systems like the flight control computer where the MCAS software is located.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, Mr. Ed Pearson, for joining us. He's a former Boeing employee, a whistleblower who had sort of flagged some of these safety issues around the 737 MAX much before the crashes that happened in 2017 and 18. I want to now move on to the other story that we're tracking. The Election Commission has now identified a large number of individuals from Nepal, Bangladesh and Myanmar during a special intensive revision exercise that's going on in Bihar. The BJP has alleged that the RJD, the Congress and the left are pressurizing officials to include the names of foreigners. The opposition has simply asked that if such foreigners were voting, then all elections would have been won by the NDA, and that'll be fraud, accusing the Election Commission of acting like a political party's cell. Now, here's what the Election Commission has said in response to this by way of EC sources. The Election Commission's booth-level officers, or BLOs, have found a significant number of individuals from Nepal, Bangladesh and Myanmar possessing Indian documents like Aadhaar, domicile certificates and ration cards during the ongoing special intensive revision of electoral rolls. Sources further added that a thorough verification will be carried out between August 1st and 30th, and any names that are found ineligible will be excluded from the final voter list, which is set to be published on the 30th of September.
ताज़ा अपराध बेखौफ अपराधी बिहार में वकील को गोली मारी. That's Tejasvi Yadav, the former Deputy Chief Minister of Bihar, tweeting and targeting Nitish Kumar's government yet again. As a spate of killings, murders go on in Bihar, Tejasvi Yadav is sharpening his attack against the ruling combine. He's also raising questions about what the Bharatiya Janata Party is doing, because some of the victims of the recent spates of crime are also people associated with the Bharatiya Janata Party. Now, BJP has taken this line that unlike when Rabdi Devi was in power or when Lalu Prasad Yadav was in power, now there is no political patronage that is being given to criminals. The police is acting swiftly. Tejasvi Yadav has called EC sources in a very derogatory term when he was asked by by the media that EC sources are saying that a lot of people in the SIR are coming out as people who are illegal immigrants who should not be here in India. To that, Tejasvi, in a very disparaging note, said that I don't believe these sources. And even as Election Commission continues to showcase how almost all enumeration forms have come back, the question that the opposition is asking is all right for the form to come in, but how many of the people you're enumerating have managed to give the supportive document? EC has told the Supreme Court that till the claims and objection stage, which means till August, supportive documents can come in, and the real struggle will begin then. How many people manage to give these documents in such a short time?
Meanwhile, irked by the findings, the RJD has gone to the Election Commission yet again. In his latest attack, Tejasvi Yadav has questioned these sources and even equated them to urine. Now, the BJP's hit back by saying that it's the NDA government that's ensuring only those who are eligible to cast their votes are allowed to do so. Unrelenting in his attack, Tejasvi then questioned the authenticity of these sources, claiming that they are the ones who even claimed that India had captured Islamabad and Karachi during Operation Sindoor. Hitting right back, the BJP said that it's vote bank politics above the constitution for the opposition. Tejasvi went on to ask if the SIR was conducted in 2003 under the UPA government, and since the opposition has lost many elections, so is it the illegals who voted for the NDA? The BJP said that Congress and RJD are trying to protect illegal voters. Tejasvi has also added that dubious elements in the voter list in the NDA government is the NDA government's fault. The BJP says it's the opposition that has chosen illegals over legal voters.
इसका चुनाव आयोग से कोई डॉक्यूमेंट या कोई प्रेस नोट या कोई ऐसी बात आई है या कि कहाँ से खबर आई? सोर्सेज बता रहे हैं, सूत्र बताते हैं, हम उस सूत्र को वेस्ट जो होता है ना, ये वो है, इसका कोई आधार नहीं ना, ये वही सूत्र है जो पाकिस्तान में कब्जा करवा दिया था, इस्लामाबाद, कराची। सूत्र नहीं होगी, जो भी सूत्र थे उनका न्यूज़ क्या रहा? हर बार खंडन करना पड़ता है, माफी मांगना पड़ता है उसके बाद। इसलिए अगर सूत्र को मूत्र नहीं बोला जाए, जो झूठा अफवाह फैलाता है, तो मूत्र के बराबर है ना, वेस्टेज है, वेस्ट ही है ना।
A drunk driver behind the wheel of an Audi car crushed 5 people, including an 8-year-old girl sleeping on the footpath near the Shiva camp. This is in the posh Vasant Bihar area of Delhi. The victims who sustained injuries in the incident were rushed to a nearby hospital for treatment. The incident took place around 1:45 a.m. on the 9th of July. Eyewitnesses claim that the car then drove for some distance, after which rammed into a truck. So it's not bad enough that he ran over these 5 individuals. A few meters away, then he went and rammed into a truck, and that's how the car got stopped. Medical tests later confirmed that the driver was under the influence of alcohol, but the shocking part, very light sections of the Motor Vehicles Act and the BNS were applied in this case, as a result of which the driver managed to get bail.
ओडी वाला इधर से आया, रात का 1-1:30 का टाइम था, 1:30 बज रहा था। यहाँ से जैसे गाड़ी चढ़ी तो आवाज़ आई, हमने देखा वहाँ से ये क्या हो रहा है। हमारी लाइट नहीं आ रही थी, तो हम सब बाहर थे, तो ऐसे करके यूं चढ़ा के ले गया वो, और वो आदमी सो रहा था वहाँ से। 5 आदमी के जाके 5वें आदमी पे जाके उसने यहाँ पे गाड़ी रोकी है।
गाड़ी वाले ने अपना गेट खोल के गाड़ी में से निकले थे, ड्राइवर भैया ने निकले थे। उसके बाद में जब देखे तो सारे पब्लिक इकट्ठा हो गए, तो ड्राइवर भैया घबरा के उस गाड़ी में बैठे हैं। यहाँ से गाड़ी नीचे उतारे, वो अपना नीचे उतारने के बाद में ऐसे हम लोग सोचे भाग गए, मगर वो भागे नहीं थे, वो ऐसे उल्टन मार के वहाँ गाड़ी रोके हैं। रोकने के बाद में ये जो टूटा हुआ है, यहाँ से ऐसे आने के बाद में 100 नंबर वाले को बोला, सर सॉरी हमारे से गलती हुई है, हम ड्रिंक कर रखे हैं और इन लोग को चोट लग गया है।
मेरे परिवार में जैसे 2 हुए थे, लेकिन इसके चोट लग गई, इसके कान फट गए, वो नहीं आया, पुलिस वाले आए थे, पुलिस वाले लेकर गए थे। हाँ जी।
The severity of the crash can be gauged from the condition of the car, which was completely wrecked. Neither that nor the injuries on the victims were deemed fit by the police to invoke the most stringent sections against this drunk driver. Section 281 of the BNS was applied for rash and negligent driving. That's a bailable offence. The same with Section 125A of the BNS, which gives you instant bail despite endangering human life or personal safety. and Section 185 of the Motor Vehicles Act, which categorizes drunk driving as a serious offence. The first offence can result in imprisonment of 6 months and or a fine of up to 10,000 rupees. For a second offence, the punishment can extend to imprisonment of up to 2 years and a fine of up to 15,000 rupees. Despite this, the section is classified as a bailable offence, allowing the police or the magistrate to grant bail. In this case, the accused, although his medical report confirmed that he was drunk, the fact that it was his first offence made the decision to grant bail legally possible. What they could have invoked is Section 105 of the BNS, which is culpable homicide not amounting to murder. That is a non-bailable offence and could have ensured that the drunk driver spent more time behind bars.
A 40-year-old drunk man driving an Audi at high speeds meets with an accident twice in a single night. Definitely, if you hear this entire story seems very, very untrue and absolutely impossible to believe on. But this is the Audi vehicle. You can see the condition of this Audi vehicle over here. The incident happened a few days ago when Utsav, a 40-year-old person who was driving this vehicle, initially went ahead and rammed on at least 5 people who were sleeping on a footpath. As he goes ahead, he meets with another accident. This time, he hits a truck from behind. Yet again, because he was drunk, he was sloshed, he was not able to see the roads in a clear manner. You can see the condition of this entire vehicle. All the airbags of this vehicle have been opened. Thankfully, this car was expensive and had all those security features, because of which the accused, the person who was driving this vehicle, remained safe. But this person was taken into custody and then was allowed to let go by the Delhi police. According to the Delhi police, the exact reason for granting him bail is that the sections that were imposed against him, these sections did not mandate an immediate arrest, and these sections also had the option for the police to grant him bail from the police station itself. And that is what has happened in this entire matter.
I want to go across to Mr. Anuradha Kul. She's the founder and president of TRACS. This is a citizens' body that fights for victims of road accidents. So there's criticism against the decision that all the charges that have been leveled against this drunk driver were all bailable charges under the BNS. The most strict charge, which should have been culpable homicide not amounting to murder, that was not invoked in this case. Do you believe that that is a valid criticism, that this case too the accused deserved to be charged with culpable homicide?
Actually, in number of cases, we must have seen, because under the pressure, police is taking some stringent action against all these things. But sometimes, because these cases are handled as per Motor Vehicle Act, till the moment these cases must not be mentioned properly with the proper specifications in Motor Vehicle Act, such type of actions are dependent on the police mercy. What type of action they are taking. If yes, under the media pressure or other pressures, then they are forcing and they are taking the proper actions on that. But all the happenings which are taking place recently, number of people are doing the same things, whatever the rash driving, negligent driving, and everything is going on. And this is depending on the infrastructure and the enforcement problem. Because during the night, our police is vanished from 90% of the places. We don't have the police personnel, so people are free to do anything, whatever they want.
But sir, there were 5 people who were injured. One of them, I believe, is an 8-year-old child, and she's still in hospital. This discretion that allows the police to decide which sections to charge a person with, or which sections to apply when a complaint is filed and an FIR is registered, this to my mind seems like a clear case where BNS 105, which is culpable homicide not amounting to murder, clearly could have been invoked. And the fact that this was a drunk driver that's been proven by the medical test, how does one ensure that the police do not misuse this discretion to charge people with just bailable charges, bailable sections of the BNS, so that they can get bail and move on?
Actually, first of all these things has to be put out from the Motor Vehicle Act. Because in several countries, there are different acts like Rash Driving Act, Negligent Act. Everything is there. in the same manner, if you will see in past, we have framed one act, that is Hit and Run Act. But under the pressure of different communities, different organizations, that was kept in dustbin. So this is the same thing. Till the moment all the cases are handled through the Motor Vehicle Act, such happenings will be there. It will be on the mercy of the police. What type of cases they want to frame, maybe under the pressure, maybe along with the other drivers' families' pressure, or somewhere. So first separate all these things from Motor Vehicle Act. These are the killings, and he is a drunk driver. He knows very well what is the drink and driving, what is rash driving. Everybody knows. So I think we must treat all these things, or we should frame the separate acts for all these things apart from Motor Vehicle Act.
Mr. Kul,
and this is a solution.
that. Thank you very much for joining us. I agree with you. I think there needs to be stringent provisions, particularly for drunk driving, and where it involves, putting the lives of 5 people in this instance in grave danger. Let's now move on to some slightly more positive news. After nearly 3 weeks in space at the International Space Station, India's pride, Shubhanshu Shukla, is all set to return to Earth after spending 18 eventful days on board the International Space Station. The crew of Axiom 4 has undertaken a 22-hour journey back home. They will be splashing down off the coast of California Tuesday at 3 p.m. IST. Group Captain Shukla, who became the first Indian astronaut to go to the ISS and the first Indian to reach space in the last 40 years, was to spend up to 14 days at the ISS. However, his stay got extended by about 4 days. During his stay at the orbiting laboratory, he conducted several microgravity research experiments proposed by Indians from the national R&D laboratories and academic institutions. He also interacted with Prime Minister and a couple of interactions with school students back home via the ham radio. Here's a snippet of what he said just before leaving the ISS.
Thank you, TB, for setting the precedence. I can speak as long now. So it has been an incredible journey. I did not imagine all this when I started on Falcon 9 on 25th. And I think it has been made amazing or incredible because of the people who are involved. The team that is standing behind me, you guys have made it really special for us being here on the station. And it was an incredible joy to be here and working alongside with a bunch of professionals like you. Over the past 2.5 weeks or so, we have done a lot of science on the station. We have done outreach activities and also looked back at the Earth. Whatever time we found, we were always looking out the window. And it almost seems magical to me. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank my country and all their citizens for supporting this mission and me with all their hearts. And I would like to thank ISRO for making this happen, all the colleagues at ISRO who have worked tirelessly in developing all the protocols, the science and the outreach activities, the researchers back in India, the students who developed the outreach items that I carried. I would also like to thank NASA and its international partners, Axiom Space, SpaceX, for ensuring that we were trained adequately well and providing all the support round the clock, and all the people who were sitting on ground supporting this mission, making it extremely successful. I would agree with what TB said, that these missions have much far-reaching implications beyond science, and that is what I believe that this mission would also do in all of our respective countries as well. Going back from here, I carry with me a lot of memories and the learnings out of this mission that I would try and spread back. But the one thing that really sticks to me is what humanity is capable of when all of us come together from different parts of the world and work for a common goal or a common objective. It is truly incredible. So thank you everyone, and it has been an incredible mission for me. And अब कुछ शब्द मेरे देशवासियों के लिए हिंदी में. कमाल की यात्रा रही है ये मेरी, लेकिन अब जैसे मेरी ये यात्रा ख़त्म होने वाली है, आपकी और मेरी यात्रा अभी बहुत लंबी है. हमारी ह्यूमन स्पेस मिशन की जो यात्रा है वो बहुत लंबी है और बहुत कठिन भी है. लेकिन मैं आपको विश्वास दिलाता हूँ कि अगर हम निश्चय कर लें तो तारा अपि प्राप्यन्ते, इवन स्टार्स आर अटेनेबल. 41 साल पहले कोई भारतीय अंतरिक्ष में गए थे और उन्होंने हमें बताया था कि ऊपर से भारत कैसा दिखता है. और कहीं ना कहीं मुझे लगता है कि हम सब ये जानना चाहते हैं कि आज भारत कैसा दिखता है। मैं आपको बताता हूँ, आज का भारत स्पेस से महत्वाकांक्षी दिखता है। आज का भारत निडर दिखता है। आज का भारत कॉन्फिडेंट दिखता है। आज का भारत गर्व से पूर्ण दिखता है। और इन्हीं सब कारणों की वजह से मैं एक बार फिर से कह सकता हूँ कि आज का भारत अभी भी सारे जहाँ से अच्छा दिखता है। जल्दी धरती पर मुलाकात करते हैं। धन्यवाद।
And we'll all be looking out for Shubhanshu Shukla once he makes that splash off the coast of California. He'll be in quarantine for a few days before he can return home. Finally, after campaigning on a promise to bring a swift end to the war in Ukraine, Donald Trump is now expressing growing frustration with Vladimir Putin's refusal to agree to a peace deal. And perhaps that's why Trump has now announced that he will be sending the Patriot air defense systems, the interceptor missiles, to Ukraine. But is there more to that decision than meets the eye? I delve a little deeper. In a major policy decision, US President Donald Trump has decided to send advanced Patriot missile systems to Ukraine to help it defend itself against intensifying Russian missile attacks. The decision marks a significant shift for Trump. Trump had previously expressed reluctance in continuing with large-scale military aid to Kyiv. So then the basic question is, what prompted this change of heart and this change of strategy? Sources close to the Trump administration say that they're mounting pressure on NATO, rising Russian aggression both in mainstream cities like Kyiv as well as in western Ukraine, and assurances that European allies will bear the financial burden have helped sway Trump's stand.
We will send them Patriots, which they desperately need, because Putin is really surprised a lot of people. He talks nice and then he bombs everybody in the evening. So there's a little bit of a problem there, and I don't like it.
The Patriot, which is a shot for phased array tracking radar to intercept on target, it's one of the most sophisticated air and missile defense systems in the world. It was first introduced in the early 1980s. The Patriots gained global recognition during the Gulf War in 1991 when they were deployed to intercept Iraqi Scud missiles. Since then, the Patriot missile systems have evolved not just in target but also in targeting ballistic missiles and cruise missiles as well as advanced aircraft. The missile system's radar can detect incoming threats from up to over 100 kilometers away, and that gives the defenders time to launch these interceptors. For Ukraine, which is grappling with waves and waves of Russian missile and drone strikes on its cities, the Patriots could be a game changer, particularly when it comes to protecting big cities like Kyiv as well as other critical urban infrastructure. Trump's agreement also hinges on NATO sharing the cost of sending these Patriots to Ukraine. He has claimed that Europe must pay its fair share, and he's also reportedly negotiated a deal where Poland and Germany will fund the bulk of the deployment of the Patriots and their maintenance. This allows Trump to maintain his America First fiscal narrative while at the same time still responding to the geopolitical urgency in Eastern Europe and the urgency with which Ukraine needs these missile batteries to defend itself. But all of this was boiling over for a number of weeks now. Trump unleashed weeks of frustration with President Vladimir Putin of Russia over what he described as meaningless gestures towards peace. This came just days after Trump said that the United States would resume sending ammunition, but at that time he said it was defensive ammunition to Ukraine to try and help it fend off Russia's invasion. Trump's remarks were the harshest that he's made towards Putin since he was first elected as president in 2016. This also comes as an abrupt change in public posture towards Russia after months of failing to forge peace. This was a conflict that Trump, when he was on the campaign trail, had boasted he could end in a single day. Now he's going to be close to 6 months in office, and the war is simply increasing in scope and ambit, not moving towards a ceasefire.
I'm not happy with Putin. I can tell you that much right now, because he's killing a lot of people. And a lot of them are his soldiers and their soldiers, mostly. And it's now up to 7,000 a week. And I'm not happy with Putin. We get a lot of bullshit thrown at us by Putin, for you want to know the truth. He's very nice all the time, but it turns out to be meaningless.
The US president's disillusionment with his Russian counterpart, along with more positive recent interactions that he's had with President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine, have appeared to be driving his decision to resume sending some air defense interceptors as well as precision-guided missiles to Ukraine. It's unclear, though, how quickly the initial tranche of these weapons, which was held up in Poland, will be arriving in Ukraine. But the decision to release these ammunition were cheered in Ukraine, which has suffered major Russian air attacks over the last few weeks. The decision came shortly after a phone call between Trump and Putin a few days ago. Trump has been growing increasingly frustrated with Putin in recent weeks. Advisors have been saying that he believes that Putin is stringing him along. At the end of May, Trump had indicated to reporters he might impose new sanctions on Russia, only to turn away from that. Meanwhile, there are now reports of a new bill being shepherded by Republican lawmaker Lindsey Graham, in which countries that trade with Russia and import Russian oil will be penalized. The Trump administration is hoping that further economic sanctions on Russia will tighten the grip and perhaps get Putin to back off. Germany, France, Britain, and Italy have all publicly told Trump that there have to be new American sanctions. And that's the only way it can force President Putin of Russia to enter into serious negotiations about ending the war. Without these sanctions, Putin has been escalating, he's been prolonging Russia's attacks in an attempt to break Ukraine's defenses. Trump has also said he's very strongly considering supporting this bipartisan Senate bill, which is being moved by Lindsey Graham as well as other Republican senators. According to this bill, there would be severe sanctions, not just on Russia, but also countries like India and China, which purchase Russian oil. They're hoping that collective global pressure of countries of influence will actually get Russia and Putin to back off. Trump has long praised Putin as a tough-as-nails leader. He's been scornful of Zelensky. In fact, earlier this year, he publicly scolded the Ukrainian president in a remarkable encounter that happened inside the White House. In fact, as Trump's disillusionment with Russia's leader is building, Pentagon officials were also growing increasingly concerned about the potential depletion of America's stockpile of weapons. Remember, America had supplied Israel with weapons. It has also used weapons in its attacks against Iran. And there were concerns among top US generals that some American bases in the Middle East could be targeted, particularly if America joined in Israel's war against Iran. In fact, over the past couple of years, the Pentagon has sent more than $60 billion of weapons and ammunition, as well as military equipment to Ukraine. But what Ukraine needs the most are these Patriot interceptor missiles. The interceptors are particularly prized because they are one of the few weapons that Ukraine can use to knock down Russia's most advanced missiles. They've been critical in Ukraine's struggling effort to hold off increasingly intense attacks from Russia. And now Trump has said he is going to give Ukraine exactly that, the Patriot interceptors. He's also promising to make NATO pay for these weapons. And if that actually came to pass, as is expected this week, then Trump would have turned a corner in his Russia policy and also in his purported bromance with Vladimir Putin.
Co-presented by... This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
Okay, a statement coming in right now from Air India. This is about the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, the AAIB report that was released over the weekend, the preliminary report that investigated why the air crash happened in the manner that it did in Ahmedabad. This is the statement that the Air India CEO Campbell Wilson has said. He said the report found no mechanical or maintenance issues with the aircraft or engines, and all mandatory maintenance tasks had been completed. There was no issue with the quality of fuel and no abnormality with the takeoff roll. The pilots had passed their mandatory pre-flight breathalyzer and there were no observations pertaining to their medical status. Now, he's also said, it's important to point, he's also said, I would also remind that out of an abundance of caution and under the oversight of the DGCA, every Boeing 787 aircraft operating in our fleet was checked within days of the accident and all were found fit. We continue to perform all necessary checks. This is the first statement we've got of this nature coming out post the probe report. We'll just go over to reporters to bring you more context. Remember, this is the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau report that came out. Again, it's just the preliminary report. It had just come out. We'll go over to reporters to understand a little bit more around it in just a second. We'll also tell you more about the key questions, because remember, that's what we focused on in the last few hours, the unanswered questions in this report and what it remains. Remember, the central conclusion right at the heart of that report and of this crash was this question of how the switches transitioned from run to cut-off position within a second of each other, moments after liftoff. And again, this report had highlighted that one of the pilots was recorded asking the other why he cut off the fuel, to which the other pilot responded saying he did not. More than that is not given in terms of transcript between the two pilots in that preliminary report. Now we'll just go over to our colleague Anvit to understand more. Anvit, the first formal response of Air India CEO Campbell Wilson coming in, how do you read it? He's touched on a few different points. He's touched on the pilot's health. He's talked about the health of the aircraft. Just touch on each of the key points here, then we'll come to you with more questions.
First of all, I would like to start with the point that he has made that all the aircrafts were inspected. So after this incident that happened, DGCA had issued an advisory asking Air India and other airlines to make sure that there are multi-layered inspections of the aircraft, which was done, and DGCA had also later on released a statement saying that majority of these aircrafts are found to be fit for operations. Also, he has made a point on the health of the pilots, and the report, the AAIB report, also goes on to mention that the pilots had got adequate rest period, and also the crew that was called to perform duty on the flight, they were also found fit to operate. But when we come to the point of the switch being transitioning, like you mentioned, from run to cut off, one pilot has been asked, has the transcript that has been released, it says that one pilot was asking the other as to how did the switch transition, but he says I did not do so. So the rest of the part of the transcript that has not been made public. So the pilots association, since the beginning, they have been saying that this portion of transcript that has been released, this points out to something happened, something went wrong in the cockpit. So
okay.
They have been making a point that this completely puts the onus on the pilots, and therefore they are saying that there are certain points that need to be kept in mind. One is that they are saying that the committee that is investigating the matter, there are no undersigned in the report, so their name should have been mentioned. Also, they are demanding that there should be inclusion of pilots who had previously handled Boeing 787. So these are certain points that need to be looked at. But if we talk about the report and this Campbell statement, the transition that was made from run to cut off, the report does not go on to mention that whether it was manual or was it mechanical. So we have spoken to officers in DGCA and MOCA as well. So they have also said that these are initial report, these are only indication as to what happened, but how it happened would probably follow in the later detailed report which the AIB is currently working on. Also remember one thing, that there are certain aspects which are currently under investigation. The data recovered from the FDR, that is also still being analyzed. The fuel that had been recovered from the auxiliary power unit, the APU, that is also still under analysis. So certain
Namaste, Jai Hind, you're on the Hard Facts. I'm Anand Narsimhan. Report suggests the Election Commission has identified a large number of individuals from Nepal, Bangladesh and Myanmar during the special intensive revision in Bihar. The BJP has alleged that the RJD, Congress and the left are pressuring officials to include names of foreigners. RJD leader Tejasvi Yadav has hit back, questioning the credibility of the sources, likening them to urine. So, जो आपके सूत्र हैं वो हमारे लिए मूत्र हैं. That's what he has turned around and said. Now, he said if such foreigners were voting, then all elections won by the NDA should then be declared void. They are all fraud, accusing the Election Commission of acting like a political party cell. Meanwhile, Congress leader Rahul Gandhi is also set to review his party's strategy in poll-bound Bihar as the Supreme Court hears the India Bloc's petition challenging the voter list revision. Now, as per the Election Commission sources and multiple reports, foreign nationals have been found with crucial documents like Aadhaar, voting cards and ration cards. Nepal, Bangladesh, Myanmar nationals have been found in the Bihar voting list. Non-citizens will be purged from the voter roll before the elections. That's what the Election Commission is saying. But this is what Tejasvi Yadav has had to say.
इसका चुनाव आयोग से कोई डॉक्यूमेंट या कोई प्रेस नोट या कोई ऐसी बात आई है, या कि कहां से ये खबर आई।
सोर्सेज बता रहे हैं,
सूत्र बताते हैं, हम उस सूत्र को वेस्ट जो होता है ना, ये वो है, इसका कोई आधार नहीं ना। ये वही सूत्र है जो पाकिस्तान में कब्जा करवा दिया था, इस्लामाबाद, कराची। सूत्र नहीं, जो भी सूत्र थे उनका न्यूज़ क्या रहा।